Hello everyone. How's it going? Happy Saturday. I'm a little further away from the mic. Hopefully you can still hear me. Because I've been invaded. I don't think you can see him, but there's a giant cat. Oh, here, let me... Can I turn off? He's not a person, so it's not showing him. Gigi, no. He's part of the background. It's not working. Here, let me see if I can turn all that off. Let's see if I do this. And then I make camera capture. Add that. I don't remember how I set up the filter. If I did it in OBS, I did. Okay, good. Here. He's so big. Gigi, look. Yeah. He's huge. Pop, pop. Illusion ruined. But here we are. Alright, let's get my chat stuff up here. So today we're going to be talking about journaling for mental health. Going to be going through the free journal that I have out there so everyone can download. It's over at rollpunches.com, ROLE punches.com. If you want to go ahead and download it, we can do it together today. I'm curious to hear some of your guys' answers, as you will be hearing some of mine. I think that'll be fun. We'll talk about some of the benefits. We'll talk about some of the reasoning behind the different things that are in it. And then maybe you guys have ideas of stuff that you are doing in your own journaling that maybe could make it in its own way as well. But yeah, it's hilarious. Gigi's very food driven, so he lets you know when it's time to eat. And I often have tuna fish for lunch. And he doesn't like tuna fish, but he thinks he does. It's in a can. It smells like fish. So he's always very interested whenever there's tuna fish involved. Although he won't actually eat it. So don't know if that tells me something about the tuna fish. Maybe I shouldn't be eating it. But he's more of a salmon boy than tuna fish. We're into the nerd. Normally I pop in here to Rick's live streams to support him as a wave rider, but today I actually have questions about autism. What question do you have before we get started? Oh no, my glasses are in the bedroom and there's a cat on my lap. I just realized. Darn. Maybe we'll turn these lights off for now. And then once I can evict this cat, we'll... Ooh, dark and spooky. We'll turn him back on. Remind me later. Dream of one of my favorite classic TV shows from the 90s. Let me guess. Was it Beyblade? I actually don't remember if that was the 90s or not. That feels like it might have been the 2000s. No, lighting's not too bad without the lights. Kind of fits with the mood, of the atmosphere a little better. I need like a flickering neon light is what I really need to work on. Nick Arcade. That sounds familiar. I watched a lot of Nick as a kid. I'm sure if I saw it, I would remember it, but what can you do? Okay, well, Revenge of the Nerd, you can put your question whenever, and I will get to it. But let's go ahead and start to talk about journaling. So, I kind of had this revelation today, but I feel like social media has replaced journaling for a lot of people, where like people will just kind of spew out their thoughts. And normally for me in journaling, like it's very crucial for me to get thoughts out of my head, because if they're just there, they will just tumble around until, you know, they form into a diamond, and then it just kind of becomes truth. When it's important to remember that thoughts, feelings are not truth. Just because you think something doesn't mean that it's true. And so a good way for me to look at the things I'm thinking objectively is to externalize them. And if I can talk them out with someone else, that's one way to do it, like a friend, a wife, a therapist. Another way to do it is to write it down and then maybe give it a day and read it and try to look at it from the point of view of not something that I wrote, but something that a friend is coming to me with. And then how would I deal with it then? Because if I'm trying to deal with it myself, in my own head, it doesn't work out very well. I don't make a ton of progress. So that's kind of the main thing that journaling helps me with. But there's a bunch of other positive benefits I find that it helps me as well. Now, normally for my journaling, I just do it in my phone. I have a journaling app. There's tons of them out there. Oh, the beast has awakened. You can see the tail coming in and out of existence. But yeah, there's a lot of different benefits. We'll kind of talk about them, and we'll talk about why I made the decisions I made to the journal that I put out there. It's, you know, I don't think much of it is my original idea. It's just kind of a different spin on a lot of classical techniques. But it all comes together in a nice way. So, let's start to talk about it. Let's switch to this one. Bam. Yeah, I could probably still have the background in, but this is fine. Whatever. It'll work. Dora says, normally I write on paper, but recently I've started writing on a laptop. Need to catch up. Notes, it's easier to write on my phone in bed. Yeah, I used to keep a paper notebook. My hand starts to hurt very quickly whenever I write. That's always been the case. I've heard other autistic people mention that as well. Don't know if it has something to do with like the hypermobility of the joints, or if there's another reason, but I've always preferred typing to long writing for that reason. My question about autism. My daughter, age 11, me and her mom have noticed since she was like 5 or 6 that when she watches a YouTube video or movie or show, or generally watches something and tunes out. I don't think that's a complete thought, so I will let you finish it. Okay. So there's a bunch of different parts of the journal, and I'm kind of going to skip around. I'm going to leave the character sheet for last because I think that's going to take the most amount of time, though I think it's one of the more interesting parts of it. But I want to start things off with the daily journal. So it has a number of different sections, and you know, you use what works for you. You supplement what doesn't with something that does. Not everything that works for me is going to work for you, but I do find a lot of benefits in this different type of journaling. So the first one is what's called a gratitude journal. And the idea behind that is writing down things that you are grateful for. And the reason it is helpful is, one, it puts your mind in the state of looking for things that you are grateful for. So you're kind of tricking yourself to be positive in a way. And if you're looking for that positivity, you will find it. And once you find it and write it down, you can remind yourself that there is positive in your life. And it doesn't matter how big or small that is. It's just important to be aware of it and to look for it and to appreciate it. Now, something else I've also used a gratitude journal for is to not only help change my own mindset to be more positive, but also to change my mindset to be more positive towards specific other people or things. So as an example, there was a period of time when I focused my gratitude journal specifically and entirely on my wife. So it was 3 things that I'm grateful for Maggie for. And so I felt it was important for me to be able to recognize and to be able to express to her all the different ways that she made a positive impact in my life. And in order to help me do that, I would keep a gratitude journal just for that purpose, where I was making it a goal and I was putting in effort in order to recognize things that she would do in a day that positively impacted my life. And then I would make sure to share those positive things with her. So I think that's a wonderful thing to do in a relationship, because it's easy to grow, what's the word? Not complacent, but it's on the tip of my tongue. Can't quite think of it. But just sort of take that sort of stuff for granted, right? Where someone is nice to you for so long that it no longer becomes special, and it's just sort of the expected thing. But it is a special thing, and it should be treated as such. And so if there is someone in your life that your relationship is at a rocky point, it could be a coworker, it could be a significant other, it could be a parent or a child, I would recommend trying to make a special gratitude journal just for that person, and to share those things with that person as well. Because if you don't share it, I still think it has a positive plus to your life, where you will just think of that person better and you will therefore treat them better. But by also just allowing them to know that you do appreciate these things, it's more likely that they will continue to do those things. So that's kind of the first section. And you can read about gratitude journals. There's a bunch of research about how it works or how it seems to work. I've linked this one here, but there's a ton of research out there about it. It's not something I came up with, but it is something that I do utilize. Oh no, I forgot to fill this section in. I did it on this one. So today I am grateful for, I don't know, let's see. I'm grateful for the wonderful positivity from the people watching my stream. It's something that I'm grateful for today. Oh no. Everything is broken. But you get the idea. Something else I am thankful for today. Let's see. I probably should have done this beforehand, but we're doing it live. I am thankful. I'm thankful for my new rowing machine, because it's allowed me to be able to exercise at home, which is in a safe space, because I've been having a lot of sort of PTSD, panic disorder-like issues when it comes to exercising. So instead of having to go somewhere else in order to work out, I can work out at home in a safe spot and sort of rewire my brain to sort of track along those positive connections and not have to focus on the panic attacks that I've had while exercising, while trying to get better at it. So that's something I'm thankful for. And, I could extrapolate that to a person because Maggie had injured her back, so we had gotten the rowing machine in order to help rehab that. So if it hadn't have been for Maggie, I probably wouldn't have gotten it. Can be thankful for Blind Wave. I have a job and am at a place financially where I can invest in a workout machine. So you can tie gratitude to all kinds of different aspects in your life. It just depends on where you want to focus it. And whatever's occupying your thoughts and your time, whatever you're focusing on, that's kind of what has the most value in your life. Or it should be that way. So that's another reason for the gratitude journal. And then for the last one, let's see. I am thankful. Let's see. I'm thankful for being able to work at a job that lets me spend time in experiments like this and roll with the punches. And is a job where I can take some time to work from home when I need it. So that's not something that everyone has. Okay, so that's sort of the idea behind the gratitude journal. Highly recommend it, even if you don't use my journal that I provided. Just write those things down in your phone. And the research shows that you want to do at least 3 to 5 of those in order for it to be the most beneficial. There is sort of a point in the studies that I've read where it sort of drops off. So if you do like 100 or something like that, it isn't 100 times more effective than doing 1, as an example. So 3 to 5, you're pretty golden. And that's something that doesn't take a lot of time, but can make a huge impact in your life. Okay, back to Revenge of the Nerds comment. She watches stuff, she tunes out, hums idly. When asked, she doesn't remember doing it. Her mom called it a tick. I suggest stimming might be more accurate. It does sound like stimming. There's all kind of different ways to stem. I pace. For me, it depends. It used to depend on where I am and who I'm around. That's still kind of true in reactions, just because I don't want it to be distracting. But, it can be pacing. It could be jumping up and down. That's something that I do a lot. I did a lot more when I was a kid. Flapping arms. It could be waving your fingers in front of your face. Doing the John Cena sort of thing. It could be twirling your hair. It can be playing with a toy. It could be humming. It could be repeating phrases. There's all kind of different ways to stem. Does it have to be a different thing every time? So you have to find more things to be grateful for. Yeah, that's sort of the idea, where you don't want to just repeat things. It can obviously be the same person. But it could also be, like I said before, about taking for granted. I'm trying to think of a good example. So one of Evie's chores is to feed the cats, right? So I can be thankful every day that she is feeding the cats, and it's something I don't have to worry about or think about. And I don't want to stop being grateful for that. So, every now and then I can come back and I can list that again. Just as an example. But the idea and the practice behind it is to train your mind in order to look for those things. That's the idea. And so if you're taking, I don't want to call it a shortcut, but if you're not engaging that muscle in order to look for the positive by looking for something new, then you're kind of not engaging in what the exercise is training. So journaling is a form of exercise. You are exercising parts of your brain in order to, strengthen it, rewire it, whatever. So it's a lot like physical exercise, where if you are just, if you get on a bike, or if you get on the treadmill and you run the same amount in the same amount of time every single day, it's not going to continue to have the benefits. It'll have some benefits, but it will not benefit you as much as when you first started doing it. So you've got to continue to sort of push yourself in new ways, because our minds and our bodies are really all about complacency. They kind of want to do the bare minimum in order to survive. They want comfort over what's best for you a lot of times. And so you do kind of have to consciously work those muscles and not just assume that your brain has your best intention in mind, because it doesn't. And I know that sounds weird, but it's very true. Okay, and so something else that I like to try to do first thing in the morning is I try to think about 3 things that I want to accomplish today. And this is twofold. One, it allows me to sort of realize and prioritize the things that are important for me that day. Now, those things could be externally important, like, if I have a deadline for work that I have to do, that's important because of work. It's not necessarily something I might prioritize otherwise, but it is therefore a priority if I want to keep that job or whatever. So not only does it help me to sort of focus in on what I want to accomplish that day, but for me, it also helps in the opposite way, where it can stop me from doing too much, where my brain is always going, and if it's not focused on something, then it tends to sort of tear itself apart with negative thoughts. And so I will tend to, work on problems from when I wake up in the morning until when I go to bed at night. And I never give my brain a chance to sort of relax and to heal. It's just like if you started running when you first woke up in the morning and kept running until you went to bed at night. That's not good for your body. And it's not good for your brain either. So you do need to take that time in order to rest, to practice mindfulness. And also for me, it's sort of forcing myself off from those problems and onto people. So like making sure that I am concentrating and prioritizing on family or on friends and not just problems all the time. So, there are days when I have more than 3 things that I need to do that day, but I do try to limit myself and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, and then everything else, it's okay if it waits. Because if I burn myself out today, then I'm not going to be able to do anything tomorrow. And this is particularly important when it comes to neurodivergent people, especially people with autism. Because if I drain that battery enough, I start to have meltdowns or I start to have burnouts, and the burnouts last for months, and the meltdowns and losing different abilities to be able to speak or make decisions or whatever can last for days. So I can't let that battery drain. I've got to pace myself. So 3 things that I want to accomplish today is, I want to have a roll with the punches stream about journaling. That's one thing I want to do. I want to work on my treasure poem today because it is far away from where it needs to be. And let's see, Saturday. I need to I need to do laundry. Like those are the three main things, and then like the rest of today be like focusing on myself and my family. So like going on a bike ride with Evie and Maggie. That's one of my goals for today. That's something that like it's been difficult for me to be able to exercise away from the house, like I said before. So even simple things like taking walks with Evie and Maggie have been very stressful. So I'm going to try to continue to ease myself into that today. I talk more about that in my video journaling series, which you can see on this channel as well. So that's sort of three things that I want to accomplish today. And so you'll notice this has a sun icon at the top. These are things that I would do. I would do this entry first thing in the morning. As soon as I wake up, I don't, get on my phone and scroll on Twitter. I do this. Preferably out of bed, like as I'm drinking my coffee or something like that, because it's a terrible trap for me to just stay in bed, especially when I'm dealing with depression. I prefer dark mode. It's just easier for my eyes. I haven't heard that dark colors for a long time can make you depressed. I know a lack of sunlight and vitamin D can do it. Not to say that it's not true. I've just never heard that before. I wouldn't say that stimming is a definitive indicator of neurodiversity. There are tests just beyond that. I go over what my assessment was in that stream I did about autism a couple weeks ago. So you can watch that to sort of get an idea, but I wouldn't... It's tough because I think that self-diagnosis is completely okay when it comes to autism, because there's just not a lot of places for adults to get diagnosed. It's mainly diagnosed in children, and even then, it's not always diagnosed correctly. Like for me, it's tougher for me to say. Like I suspect that Evie might be autistic. She certainly exhibits a lot of the same symptoms, traits that I did as a kid, and continue to do so. But I am not a professional, so it's not something I could just diagnose. Does journaling help with being an overthinker? Yeah. So like I said before, my brain is always turning on something. So you can call that an overthinker. And once we get to this night section, I'll talk about how it sort of helps me being an overthinker. And then the next thing I have here is different for every day. So for the main part of this, it's about filling out different sections of the character sheet, which we're going to go over. And then for nighttime, about overthinking. What am I worried about tomorrow? What's the worst thing that could happen? What might reasonably happen? And so it feels freeing in order to put a worry down on paper and to externalize that. It's kind of like, if you know computing, taking something from RAM and writing it to hard drive, to disk, where I have sort of my working memory, my stuff I'm focused on right now. And so that's where my worries are. But sometimes, and I sort of have to be doing everything else correctly in order for this to work. So like I've got to be exercising, I've got to be meditating, I've got to be doing mindfulness, I've got to be journaling. But if it's all working well, then if I write those worries down, that's sort of externalizing them, and it gives my brain an excuse to not hold on to them. Because I hold on to them because I'm, one, thinking either consciously or unconsciously that if I put enough thought process into it, I can fix it. That is normally not the case. Or two, I'm worried if I don't think about it that I'll forget it. And this is something that Maggie deals with especially, because that can be very true for people with ADHD, where it doesn't matter how important something is, if it's not in your brain in the moment, and there's not something to like visually remind you about it, it can just be gone. And so by writing it down sort of in the evening before I start to wind down for bed, I can allow that to leave my brain because I'm not going to forget it. It's there, right? It's written down. I can just focus on relaxing and getting good sleep. And by looking at it from different perspectives, so like what's the worst outcome, what's the best outcome, what's the most reasonable outcome, I can sort of assuage my fears of it, because I can look at it more reasonably. And again, this isn't something I can just do in my head by thinking about it. It is something that I have to externalize. So I either have to talk to someone else or I have to write it down. But it has been shockingly effective. And I have a whole section for this on the roll with the conversation, which is this same idea, specifically framed for conversations with other people, like stressful conversations, conflict. But you can use this idea for any negative thought. And so you look at a thought from the perspective of a judgmental parent who judges the thought harshly, worst outcomes. From the child, which is a visceral and extreme reaction. So a lot of, I want to say infinitives, but I know that's not the correct term. But, I hate, I'll never, the kind of thing that screenwriters write for angsty teenagers. And then you write it from the perspective of a caring parent/friend. If you don't have enough time, just try to do it from this one. Voice of understanding, empathy, desire to help. And then from yourself. So you take all of those perspectives and you sort of merge them together into what it is that you actually believe. So that's the idea behind that. And then I don't want to end my thought process for the day on worries. I want to end it on positivity. And so the last thing that I have is 3 great things that happened today. So these aren't things that I'm grateful for. These are things that were positive, in the day. So my example here is I made a great meal for my family enjoyed today. Proud because I've been working hard to improve my cooking. So that would be one great thing. So I try to just not write what happened, but how I led to that positive thing in my life, right? How my actions or my efforts in some way impacted that. And so it's not just that, it's not just the fact that the family enjoyed a nice meal together. It's that they enjoyed a nice meal and I put effort into making the meal. And so my effort led to this positive result. And trying to train myself into that it is worth all that effort in order to better yourself, because it does lead to positive outcomes in your life. So the day has just started. So not a ton of stuff, but, I've had people in chat ask great questions or share thoughts, because I have been able to be so open about my struggles. Just, as an example, that's something nice that's happened. And I try to phrase it in, it's happening because I did this. All right, other questions. Has your autism recently gotten that much worse? Now that you're using special glasses, headphones, etc., you never seemed to do that stuff before. It's a good question. So no. I've been autistic my entire life. I will have more meltdowns, more shutdowns if I'm not well managed, if I'm, going through a period of great stress or something like that, if I'm not exercising, if I'm not doing these different things that I talk about in these streams. But that's been true all of my life. And so what I thought I had was anxiety, primarily. That's where I thought all the issues were coming from. And so I read a bunch about anxiety, and it's like, okay, well, this is something that's fixable. This is something that you need to face, that you need to overcome. And so that was my mindset. And, it didn't matter if I couldn't recognize what was bothering me because I was just diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. So I thought the anxiety was causing all of this uncomfortableness that I was experiencing all the time. But now that I'm able to separate it and read more about autism and see, autistic people tend to have problems with sensory issues. And so let me try to put these earplugs in. Wow. I feel so much less what I thought was anxious. But now I'm realizing, it was actually sensory overload, what I was feeling. And autistic people have a very difficult time discerning and understanding their own emotions and signals from their body. And so I just chalked everything up to anxiety. But I put those earplugs in the reaction set, and I wasn't like, I probably don't look it, but before I would be so tense. Like my fist would be clenched. I would be squeezing stress balls under the table. Clenched so hard that I was vibrating. It felt like a tiger was staring me in the face. And if I didn't fight it or flight it, I was going to die. And like that was just the feeling all the time at the reaction set. All the time. And I just pushed through it because I thought, well, this is just anxiety. And if I give in to anxiety and I don't do it, then the anxiety gets worse. And that's true. But it wasn't just anxiety. It was the sensory stuff. And so now that I'm able to separate that, I'm a lot more relaxed at the reaction set than I had been before. And so I would kind of hold it in as best as I could at work, and then I would just fall apart when I got home. I would have panic attacks. I would have emotional episodes. I would lose the ability to speak. I would have meltdowns. I would just curl up in a bed and just shake, so violently that the next day it would feel like I had just come out of a fever. That sort of soreness where like you have a fever, you're so cold and shaking all the time, and the next day you feel like you got hit by a truck. That happened all the time. But I just pushed through it. And that really did a toll on me. And I'm just now sort of allowing myself to heal from a lot of that. And I don't expect it to be something to happen overnight, if that makes sense. There's been a few different points in my life before this that I had sort of reached the breaking point. It's not a fun place to be. I'm hoping that now that I have this new level of understanding, that my last one will be my last one. And like, I know it's not going to be an easy journey. Like, I'm still going to have meltdowns. I'm still going to have shutdowns. Like, that is pretty much inevitable. I think. Maybe it isn't. Maybe I can, limit things enough that doesn't happen anymore. But I don't have to be so bewildered and afraid of it anymore because I understand it better. So that's kind of the idea. Hopefully that makes sense. And also, I was terrified of anybody finding out any of that until maybe 3 years ago. Whenever I first started talking about it at like the blind wave level, it's the first time I talked about it with anybody other than Maggie and my therapist. Like, I did not want Maggie to tell her family about, how I acted during meltdowns and stuff like that. Like, I was very ashamed about all of that because I thought it was just an anxiety thing. It's like, well, I understand anxiety. I'm doing all the right things to fix it. I just must not be good enough to be able to fix it, or not trying hard enough. But that wasn't the case. So now I'm just more open. It's like, yeah, I'll wear over-the-ear earplugs on camera. Whatever. Let people know this is okay. Do what you need to. Okay, hopefully I'm not missing any questions. All right, so that's the daily journal side of things and the reasoning for doing all of the different aspects of it. Even, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things to do every single day. But it takes me less than half an hour in order to do this, and it's worth it. Thank you, Justin, for the sub. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to let's see. I think I want to do the care sheet last because I think that's going to take the most amount of time. So the next thing we'll do is the idea of XP. So I don't need this one as much as I do the different daily journaling techniques. This is something that I tried to develop really for Maggie more than myself. Again, she was diagnosed later with ADHD in her life. So that's only something that she's been diagnosed with about as long as I've been diagnosed with autism. And so I've been trying to we both recognized that she had difficulties with motivation, but we didn't really have an answer as to why. Now we know. It's something that ADHD people struggle with. It's thought to be because of your brain not rewarding you with the chemicals that it does for other people. So it doesn't give you that dopamine hit for doing tasks like other people. Also, a difficulty when it comes to the executive function part of the brain can impact this a lot. And so I tried to develop this idea of an XP system where you are rewarding yourself immediately. Because for Maggie, it tends to work best if she rewards herself before she does the thing, or immediately upon doing the thing, right? Because her brain has already moved far past it if it's a long-term thing. So I was trying to develop something that was immediate, but also would culminate into long-term rewards. It's kind of my basic idea about it. I'm doing well, Bran. Thanks for joining us. And so the idea behind the XP system is you do a minute of activity that positively impacts your life, you get an XP. And you gain a level every 1,000 XP. You should adjust that based on you and what works best for you. Like, try it for a bit. Don't be afraid to make adjustments. And you can also give yourself more XP if you're doing something particularly challenging. So it might be 2 XP a minute for something that I really struggle with or I really don't want to do. For me, washing dishes was always terrible. Now I know it's because of my sensory issues. And I really hate the touch, the feeling of metal. I didn't really understand that so much when I was younger, but looking back, it's so incredibly obvious. And so I hated washing the dishes because I had to touch all these metal things. And just didn't realize that was it, and that I just need to wear gloves, and then everything's fine. But, so for an example, in that example, I hated washing the dishes. I might give myself 2 XP for every minute of washing the dishes. But I might not give myself XP for things that I really enjoy doing, or I might give myself half an XP or something like that. But basically, you're looking to gain a level every 7 to 14 days. And then every even level, which is when you're giving yourself a major reward, is going to happen every 21 days. And there's been some different studies saying, like, it takes 21 days for a... There's neurodivergent, and there's the other one. Why am I blanking on the term for the other one? I don't want to say a normal person, but non-neurodivergent person. I know the term, I just can't think of it. But there's been studies that it takes around 21 days in order to form a habit. So that's sort of the idea, where you are trying to gain XP for these new things that you're putting into your life, and hopefully by the time you get to that major reward, it has in some way become a habit. Neurotypical, that's it. Yes, thank you. Tip of my tongue. So I say here that the activity should challenge you, be outside your comfort zone. We're looking for activities that make us grow. And it should be an activity you find challenging to motivate yourself to do normally, such as chores, as an example. And so you go in and you give yourself some different rewards. Those rewards can be physical things. So, for example, when I was starting to box, I had different rewards of, like, a new pair of boxing gloves, a pair of boxing shoes, a jump rope, right? Stuff like that. So the more effort I put into boxing, I would reward myself with more things for that. But it can also be non-concrete things. It could be, I'm going to give myself a spa day at home, like, or for so many hours. Like, I'm going to take a hot bath, eat a good meal, play video games, or just do something in order to treat myself more than just like a normal self-care day. And so you just sort of go back and forth between minor rewards and moderate rewards. And then every 5 levels is a major reward. Again, that could be something larger, like trying to have a trip. And, you don't have to spend a ton of money to have a trip. Like, you can just drive somewhere nice. Or, like, go somewhere in your hometown that you've never been before. Something like that. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be extravagant. It just has to be something that you want. And hopefully, the idea of it is enough for you to push through the things that you otherwise might not want to do. And then every day you keep track of your XP. So anytime you do something, so start a roll with the punches, 50 XP. But, 6/8/2024, I lectured about journaling. Journaling for 2 hours. 120 XP. And leading up to this, I would have done different things of research in order to make the journal. Like, that's all stuff to better myself in order to make this thing, which can hopefully help other people. But it's led to positivity in my life. Gets XP. As an example. So that's sort of the general idea behind XP. All right, the next to the last thing is the goal map. So I look at it as I do many things in my life, like Dungeons and Dragons, where if you want to accomplish this thing, you want to slay the dragon, you've got to write out the plan on how to do it, and then you got to execute the plan. I don't want to roll through and miss questions. So I'm making sure I haven't missed any. I am in the Spectacular Spider-Man reaction, although I have seen it. You said Spider-Man and the song stuck in my head now. Okay, I think I got everything. All right, so in my example here, I have my start. My first goal is to run a mile. And this is for me to, get good at boxing, right? My first goal was to be able to run a mile. That's not the only thing that I did. I didn't just focus 100% on running, but that was the majority of my focus, was to be able to get my cardiovascular health up to a point where I could do this thing. A better goal would be run a mile in X amount of time. So like run a mile in 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever. But the sort of idea is it's a lot easier to accomplish something if you break it down into manageable pieces rather than just looking at it as a whole. So I've talked about this before on the channel, but just the idea of, I don't have to, if I wake up in the morning and I'm supposed to do 2 hours of boxing, mainly focus on the heavy bag. When I wake up, that's not my thought. That is what I need to accomplish today. My thought is, I need to put on my workout clothes. And that's as far as the brain goes. It doesn't get scared by that big dragon. It's just, I need to put on my armor. That's my first goal. Hey, I accomplished that. Now, I need to go to where the dragon lives. Doesn't mean I need to fight the dragon. I just need to go there. Step by step by step. The stepping stone technique. Until I'm in the gym, and I've done the warm-up, and I've done one round, and then I've done another round, and then another round. It's not trying to, get out of bed and jump into the fight with the dragon. It's all those little steps until the thing is done. And it just becomes a lot more manageable. And so that's sort of the idea behind the goal map, is it's not that I want to be able to do, like, my overall goal is to be able to do 10 3-minute rounds of boxing. But that's not what I'm focused on today. What I'm focused on today is this small part that is going to lead me to that greater whole. And so, just I'm curious to hear about some of your guys' goals and like what would be a step to get to that goal. So for me, I have a goal right now of I want to get one of my poems published. So I've been writing a lot more poetry recently. Something I've been doing for a long time, but I have a goal now where I want to try to write something and to get that thing published. And so my first step for that is to just write a poem every day or work on poetry every day. It doesn't mean I need to complete something. It doesn't mean that I need to, wake up, write a poem that's good enough to be published today. It's just I have committed myself to working on this thing every day. And so my goal map might look like read more poetry, learn how to better write iambic pentameter, study rhythm, study rhyme. And then there's other things of like researching publishers that might be interested in my work and, writing the query letter that the publishers read before they read the work. But most of my focus is directly in the thing that I want to do. So I want to be better at writing poetry. That means my main focus, my 80% of my investment in this task is writing more poetry. And obviously that can't be 100% of my day every day. There's other asks on my time and my efforts. But I can look at my day and what my time is focused on is what's most important to me. And if it isn't, then I need to shift things so that that is true, if that sort of makes sense. And so, getting published isn't more important than my family, but it is still something that is important and that I want to be willing to put aside so much time for in order to accomplish it. So does anyone have a goal that they would like to share? So I am very curious. My biggest problem is I have too many. And so I have, I want to get a poem published. I want to get a board game published. I want to finish this hint hunt that I've been working on forever. And there's still so much more to go. There are video games that I've been making for a very long time that I would like to complete. So for me, I like my journey right now for that is figuring out the best way to manage all of those things. And it's still something I'm trying to figure out. I think the best way is to probably put all of my focus into one of those things until it's done and then move on to the next thing. I suspect that is the correct thing to do. And that is the way that my brain naturally works, is it will attach onto one thing and just run with that thing at the expense of all others. So I'm trying to find a better balance, but also still accomplish things. So it's sort of a tough way to go. Want to grow a beard? My baby butt cheeks for a face won't let me. Unfortunately, that's not something that a goal map is probably going to help very much with. Mostly genetics. But you can always go for a fake one. I saw, I don't know what it was. It was probably a social media thing, but a bit of stick-on facial hair for Japanese men who have to be clean shaven for their jobs, but during the weekend want some facial hair. And so they just have something that they can sort of stick on and take off, which I thought was clever. Want to write a 5-minute open mic set at some point. That's awesome. No, I think that's great. Back in college, I worked on writing a bunch of like sketch comedy. That was something that I was very interested in doing for a while. It never went anywhere with it or anything like that, but it was a lot of fun. And I don't know, that doesn't seem too out of reach, I don't think. I think, writing the material and then practicing the performance, like that's very like concrete steps that you can take, right? You can, the hardest thing I think is finding a safe space for feedback when it comes to that sort of thing. Because, when you're trying something new, you're going to be terrible at it. You are. Just accept that. And so don't feel embarrassed about trying something new and failing. Like, you should feel confident that you are confident in yourself in order to stretch yourself. Like, that is a positive thing. That's not a negative thing. Failing like that. Or struggling like that. I shouldn't say failing, because you don't fail until you stop doing it. But yeah, just work it. I would be interested in seeing it. I am not a comedian, but I will give feedback if that's something that you send me. I've had people send me like boxing things before. Okay. If anyone else has any, we will circle back. But let's start talking about this idea of the character sheet. How long have I had my beard? So I have shaved it before, so it's tough for me to put a year on it. I have mostly had a beard since about the time Evie was born, so about 10 years, I think, ish. But I did shave it at one point in the middle of that, and then I grew it back and I never unshaved it. There are pictures. You can see me on YouTube, AVR Advent. There's a lightsaber fight. You can see beardless me in that. Novices versus Novi, I make a little cameo of beardless Rick. A lot younger Rick, but also beardless. I don't know if I have any pictures on my computer. I think there's a picture of me with just a mustache on my Instagram, Archmaster7, back in my karate days. There's a picture of young me and young Aaron. Dan Trinder. Hey, Rick, I have autistic children. One of them is a young adult enjoying watching your journey of discovery. Well, thank you so much. Is an email on Discord to Beardless Rick? Yeah, I believe that's true. I go through phases where I consider it, like getting it down to just a stubble, cutting the hair. I was very inspired by, why am I blanking on his name? Ray Stevenson from Dexter. I thought he looked fantastic. I was like, man, my hair gets a little more gray, I might go for that. So we'll see. All right, so I am on the right screen, right? Good. I hadn't checked. All right, so the idea of the character sheet. So this is just sort of introspection, like a self-meditation, sort of the idea. But it's also in order to see progress over time. So if you're working on working out, like you will, if you have pictures throughout the journey, which I recommend doing, you can see that change, right? But for a lot of different positive things that we're doing in our life, it's not as obvious to the eye, that sort of change. And so the idea with the character sheet is you list out all these things, and then once you reach level 5, that sheet is locked and stored away, and then you start a new sheet. You copy all that stuff over, and then you can go back and you can look at how you've gotten better in different ways. So that's one of the ideas behind it. And like I said, just an examination of self and trying to figure out, what do I want? What do I want to do? What do I want to focus in? What should I put effort in? What do I think will help? So, starts with dream/goal. So right now, like before, when I had done this, like to be a champion boxer was like a dream or goal. And so a lot of my effort was funneled towards that. Now, it's probably something closer to be a published poet. That's not the only thing I want to improve in my life. Like, I want to be able to get back to how I could exercise before, like comfortably and without worry. I want to be able to do a bunch of things I've talked about before. But like, if I want to focus on one thing that I kind of want to use this exercise to focus on, become a published poet. So we're starting a new one, level 1. Name is Rick. But you could put whatever name in here you want to. It's whatever you see yourself as. I don't have a tremendous amount of attachment to my name. I've thought about changing my name many times during my life, but it just seems like too much effort. And then XP 50 because we're starting roll with punches. Then I would have a timer going as I'm working on this. And at the end of it, I could add that much XP. Okay, so you could do this in any order, but the first thing here is class. And so this is a fun twist on Jung's idea of the 12 personality types, where I'm sort of taking those and, putting some of them together, changing some up a bit, and relating them more to a Dungeons and Dragons style archetype. But if the Dungeons & Dragons stuff doesn't jive with you, you can look into Jung's 12 types and use that, or you could make up your own. Like, it doesn't have to be these. But I say a fighter is usually an athletic type, also can represent discipline, strong will, or standing up for their beliefs. And so what you want to do in this section is you want to rank them, with 1 being the one that you identify the most with. And then I think there's 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then 7, the one that you identified the least with. So I did this the first time. I put a number 1 in fighter. Because at the time, I felt very athletic. I felt very disciplined. And I felt like I stood up for my beliefs a lot. Today, I identify less with a fighter than I did when I first put this together. So that's probably going to end up being a lower number. Wizard and academic who values knowledge and understanding, usually a specialist. So if you focus on being good at one thing, this could fit you as well. do feel myself being an academic who values knowledge and understanding, but I also don't feel as though I'm a specialist. I feel like I have a lot of different specialities. That's why my tag, my social media name is Archmaster7. Not to say that I feel like I'm a master at anything, but I feel like I can do a lot of things. Ranger, think explorer, hunter, someone who isn't afraid to venture to new lands, literally or metaphorically, often with an animal companion. So I can tell you right now, it's probably going to be my weakest, because just as a nature of being undiagnosed autistic, who has had a lot of meltdowns by being in uncomfortable places and misidentified those as panic attacks, and then eventually that did lead to panic attacks in those places. I do have a lot of agoraphobic tendencies. I like being in safe spaces, and so I don't see myself as someone who goes to new lands physically. Metaphorically, maybe a little more so. But I think I do use established research and thought in order to mold a lot of my ideas. So I don't particularly identify with a ranger, I don't think. And I probably marked that a 7 on my other one as well. No, I marked it a 6. I marked the druid as a 7, which is you give life to nature and it gives life to you. Maybe a gardener or someone who likes spending time with animals. Druids also tend to put a high value on tradition. So I definitely am not very traditional in terms of like the family that I came from. We have different views on like religion and politics and that sort of stuff, I think. So I do oftentimes see tradition as like a chain. So I often do not value that, I don't think. Although, you know, I love martial arts as well, and that is steeped in tradition, right? I love Makanoichi sumo, steeped in tradition. So again, it's not an all or nothing thing, but nature hasn't given me a ton of life in the past. But now that I kind of recognize that the light and the sounds were my problem a lot of times, I can mitigate that, and it's gotten a lot better. So I wear my dark red sunglasses outside, so much better. And I should have known that. I should have trusted myself more growing up, because growing up, there were times when I wore my Sony earbuds all the time. It made me feel more comfortable. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand it was because of loud noises, but I just knew it made me more comfortable. But at some point I stopped doing that because I, thought it was inappropriate or that it was weird or whatever. There was also a period of time where, I come from a family of like avid hunters and gun owners, and so a lot of shooting. And I had shooting glasses that were colored. And these ones were colored like a yellow-green sort of color. And I just thought the world looked so much better in those. And so there was a little bit of time where I just wore those kind of all the time. Again, I stopped doing that. But now I'm back to it, just with the red stuff. So nature now for me, since I've gotten that diagnosis and since I've self-examined things a little more, nature's actually shot up quite a bit. It helps inspire me for poetry. I like being outside more, I think, than I have in the past. So it makes sense that these would be swapped. Druid might even go a little bit higher. I still don't have much interest in like gardening or stuff like that, but it's interesting to have this that I made when I first was making this journal a couple years ago and coming back to it and seeing how much I've changed. That's kind of the point. Let's see. Bard enjoys culture, music, literature, poetry, film. Might create as well. Creative and tends to be more generalist. Good at a lot of things, but not best at anything. So I definitely identify much higher with a bard than I did when I did this the first time, although still fairly high at 3. But I think that's more of a focus for me now than it was before. Cleric, a healer or helper, maybe a teacher, often spiritual or religious. So I think that one has also... Better close out teams. Actually, you guys probably can't see that because I think I have the window. But just in case. Never know what might be revealed. But yeah, I feel like with these streams, I'm sort of back in teacher mode. I used to be a teacher back in the day. And I've gotten much more back into the mindset of it since I've started doing these sort of streams again. So that's certainly higher for me, I think. Might even be a 2. Rogue, clever, often gets into trouble, which they can usually get out of with quick wit or quick feet. I don't think I get into a lot of trouble. So that probably stays a 5. And then, let's see, I probably have 3 and 4 there. So that's shaken up quite a bit, even in just 2 years for me, which it's been a hell of a 2 years, I will admit. But that's sort of the thought process behind the class section here. And like I said before, it's kind of started in young ideas, but it's just a way for you to sort of examine yourself. Like, it doesn't mean very much. Like, it doesn't, you know, it's not like the personality test that they do at work sometimes, where it's supposed to tell the hiring person someone. Like, this is just a way for you to sort of think about yourself and think about the more important and forefront aspects of yourself. And these could change, you know, as you go through life. These numbers might switch around. Description. How would you describe yourself? You can list personality or physical traits. You can write a sentence or 2. You can describe yourself using a film, song, anything that comes to mind. How would someone else describe you? You should answer in kind to the above, but try to imagine what someone close to you would say, or what you would say to yourself if you were a friend. Did you think kinder thoughts about yourself doing this? Remember this technique going forward to help temper the fact that we tend to overjudge and criticize ourselves. So if I'm just looking at myself, I might be much harsher. You know, I might say, I don't know. I might say, like, you know, a nervous, quiet, stern, cold person. Tends to focus on work and hobbies over interpersonal relationships. And that's how I might view myself in a negative way. You know, easily overwhelmed. But if I try to frame it more positively, why is it not deleting? I might say, someone who has used their struggles to gain empathy and understanding that I use to help others. It's a little more positively framed. Just as an example. So how would someone else describe you? So that's what the idea there. And then how would you describe your ideal self? You know, ideally, I would be able to get back to boxing on my own without having panic attacks. I want to be able to better communicate my needs, thoughts, and desires with those who are important to me. So maybe that's something that I want to work on. And then the next section is skills. And so skills are what you can do, what you want to be able to do. Write an activity or skill set, give it a rank between 1 and 10, for 1 being a complete novice, something that you've just started to learn, 10 being an expert or master. So, like this person in chat, whose name I cannot read, apologies, but they want to do open mic set. So like, you know, stand-up comedy could be a skill. Where are you at that right now? Are you at a 1? Are you at a 10? Are you somewhere in between, which is probably the more likely version? And then, you know, focus one of your goal maps on increasing that number. And then every time you gain that 1000 XP and level up, come back and re-examine your skills. What have you gotten better at? So let me look at this one from a couple years ago. So programming's a 7. It's probably about the same. I haven't really, like, you know, made the new website, but a lot of that isn't strictly programming per se, but kind of adjacent or whatever. So I'd say that's probably unchanged. But cooking, I have a 2. I think that's bumped up to like maybe a 6. I put a lot of focus on that in the last couple years and have gotten tremendously better at it, I think. It would have been before this, but you know, there was a time when I would bake the pizza in the oven, leaving it on the cardboard and ruining the pizza. Now, you know, I can make all kinds of different dishes. Yeah, I can make like a sesame chicken, or I can make a whole duck for Christmas. Sweet potato casserole I make is delicious. I have a fantastic corn chowder I can do. So that's something that I've just been working at pretty much since 2020 is when I really started focusing on it. And I've made a lot of progress in the last 4 years. So it's fun coming back and seeing I rated myself as a 2. I think I've gotten a lot better. Boxing then was a 4. That's a tough one because it's probably higher for me now because I understand a lot more, but I'm also basically a year out of practice because I haven't been able to do it for a year, either for physical or mental reasons. So that would probably be closer to a 6, although at my peak, I probably would have been closer to a 7, I would say. But I think that one has come down a little bit, and certainly my physical fitness has come down in order for me able to do it as effectively as possible. But I still have all those things that I've learned. Karate is probably down a little more, especially since I blew out my knee. It's a lot tougher to kick than it used to be, which is one of the reasons I started doing boxing instead of taking up a different martial art. So yeah, let's, programming. Why not? Keep that as a 7. That seems fine. That was my profession for a long time. It's what I went to school for. Cooking, I think that's a 6. Say boxing is a 6. This is mine, but I encourage you to do it as well. And if you would like to share, I would love to know more about you. You can do it in the Roll with the Punches Discord channel, which is blindwave.gg. No, discord.gg/blindwave. Excuse me. You can get to it that way. Let's see, karate. I think that's probably down. I think physically that's down, but something in karate we did do was a lot of mindfulness. We also would write haikus. We would meditate. I think I'm better at all of that stuff. What we would call it, like, the softer side of a person and the harder side of a person. So like the punching and the kicking and the kiots, like that's the harder part of a person, but just as important as balancing the softer part. So I think I've gotten a lot better at the softer part and gotten a little softer in my own body as well. But I don't think I think the mindset that I gained from it is still very strong, even if I can't kick like I used to. Teaching, I don't know, a 5. That seems close. I've done boxing classes since then, like the ones on the channel, but also in person. I don't know. I think I'm still a fairly good teacher, even if I don't do it professionally so much anymore. Critical thought, I think, is still one of my strongest points, to my detriment sometimes. Sometimes the emotional side of the brain is required, and I have a tough time accessing that sometimes. Parenting, I think it's pretty good. I think because I have had such a bad year physically and mentally, it's restricted some of the things that I used to do with Evie. Like, I used to run behind her when she was on her bike, and now, like, this weekend is hopefully the first time I'm going to be out biking with her for the past year. So hopefully that goes well. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't go well, that's okay too. It doesn't mean that it will never go well again in the future. It's just been such a tough year. I feel like my parenting did dip a bit. Determination, if you had asked me a few months ago, I think this would be much lower, but I feel very determined yet again in order to improve myself. I've kind of gotten past a lot of those waves of depression. And again, these are your skills, so it can be whatever you want. Like, you don't have to obviously put programming down if you've never programmed and are interested in programming. Like, replace that with something else. Replace that with stand-up comedy. Replace that with playing the violin. All right. Discipline. Again, when I'm firing on all cylinders, autism helps me be the most disciplined person on the planet. I could have been a monk. I can fast anything. I can, if I'm well, I can work out every single day and it isn't a problem. When I'm depressed, that gets harder to do. So I think that has dipped a little bit, but it's still relatively high. Video games. I mean, you just need to look at that Merit College Smash tournament in order to know that that's bumped up a little bit, I think. We'll put that as an 8. Writing, I think I've gotten better than I was. I still think I have a ton of room to grow, but you can check out some of my work in progress poetry over on the Blind Wave Discord channel. There's threads under creative writing where I've been tossing some stuff out there, trying to get back into it, trying to get better. Singing, I will put this at a 2. I think I have improved, and I have worked to improve it, but I'm still terrible. But that's okay, because I don't have to be a 10 at everything. I don't have to be a 10 to enjoy something. English, don't know why I put English, but I didn't teach English, but I did a lot of, I helped English teachers, like read stuff, and I would help tutor English, and fairly decent at writing, good at throwing a resume together, which was a very valued skill. For some reason, everyone wanted help with their resume. Military history, that's continued to increase. That's just something, like, over time as I read more, it's just gonna continue to sort of bump up. It's tough with these skills where I think that if I wasn't looking at it as objectively, that there's a point where it would dip, right? So let's just take military history as an example. The more I read about Plantagenet, England, as an example, the more I realize how little I know and that there's so much more to know, right? So, like, when I'm boxing or doing karate, like, you get to a point in your learning where you realize, man, I know nothing at all. Even though you know so much more than you did when you started, your eyes just sort of open. I know that's a fallacy. I can't think of the name of the fallacy right now. Is it Kruger? The Kruger fallacy? I'm not sure. That sounds right, but it probably isn't. But there's the fallacy where, like, everyone thinks they could land a plane, right? Where you just overestimate yourself so much when you have no knowledge about something. But once you start to gain some knowledge about it, you realize how little you know. Yes, I've been programming since the 5th grade. I've been making video games for a long time. Did it professionally for a hot minute, but worked as a programmer at college. That's how I got free tuition at the colleges. I worked full-time as a programmer, got my degrees in programming. So, yeah. I do know how to program. Not the best, but I know. Game design. I don't know. Played the board game I designed just the other day. I think it's pretty good. It's the only good board game I've been able to make. I've tried making others over the years, but I don't know. I think I've got a pretty good sense of it. Something I also went to school for a little bit, but I don't know. I feel pretty good about myself in that at the moment. Project management is something I still want to get better at. Like, I think I'm better than I used to be, but still a long way to go. I think I made a lot of positive changes inside of the internal workings of Blind Wave to make us a little better at project management, but there's still a long way to go. Ping pong. We'll find out at WaveCon, because I think we're going to have ping pong there. And my grandfather, who just recently passed away, he was... I'm pretty sure it's the Air Force. But he, during the Korean War, did mid-air refueling. Was his thing that he did in the military. And apparently had a lot of downtime up in Alaska, and they played ping pong a lot. So he taught me how to play ping pong, and I felt like I got decent at it, but he was the only person I ever played with. So it wasn't like Smash where I got to play against other people and like take it kind of seriously. So I'm curious as to how good I am at ping pong now, because it's been a long time since I've played. But, you know, it's not something I'm focused on, so it's probably something I wouldn't put down on my list. I was just trying to think of a lot of things in order to do for the example, but that is a good question. Like now, I wonder, like, what skills am I focused on now that I wasn't focused on then? I don't think there are any completely new ones. I would say just like, well, that's not true. Like DBT, CBT, emotional intelligence, I think, are all things that I've focused on a lot more. So I think those are getting better. DBT, I really have just started reading into that, although I naturally have done a lot of those techniques. But, you know, I would probably say it's like this. And then emotional intelligence, that's a big one, where like just within the last couple of months, I can tell the difference between a meltdown and a panic attack. So for the longest time, it was all just anxiety and panic attack in my brain. Like anytime I was uncomfortable, that was anxiety. And anytime I got so uncomfortable that it sort of exploded, that was a panic attack. And now I recognize that's not all there is to me. That's not all there is to uncomfortableness. There's more to it than that. And so that's been an incredible revelation that seems so obvious, as most revelations do in hindsight. But I'm hoping that that is going to make a huge positive impact in my life moving forward. And just, I don't have it with me now, but like Maggie found a journal. She put together a journal for me that has like, it's basically practicing emotions, practicing identifying emotions. So it like has a wheel of different emotions. So like one slice of the wheel will be anger, but it'll be all these different flavors of anger. And so it's like when I'm feeling something, I can look at that and I can try to dial down exactly what it is. And I can try to separate it from the physical feelings that it generates. Because again, you know, anytime I would feel my throat closing, I would think that that was anxiety. But that doesn't happen just because of anxiousness. That can happen because of attraction. Like that's another reason that you can have that sort of sensation. So trying to just separate that has been something that I've been working on. You don't have to apologize for your name and being Greek. So I don't know. I think for that one, I've hit the point where I realize how much further I have to go. I think that one's going to be a 4. And then we have passions. That comes from Pendragon, which is the greatest tabletop role-playing game ever made. Rest in peace, Greg Stafford. But yeah, what do you love? What do you or used to love or want to love? It could be a person or people, wife, family, a hobby, a place. It could be anything you're passionate about. Give it ranking between 1 and 10, 10 being the most passionate. So, you know, family was a 10. Like, there's nothing more important than Evie and Maggie in my life, and that is the impetus for all of the changes that I make in my life. Like back when I started all of the things that led up to this journal and Roll with the Punches, it was because I felt like I wasn't being a good enough husband and father, and because I was in my own head all the time. I was what I thought at the time, anxious, struggling with panic disorder, depressed, and those things were hindering me from being the best dad and husband I could be. And so I set about to change it, and it was super successful. Had the best 1.5 to 2 years of my life. And then, you can look back at the history of the channel, but different things have happened that caused me to sort of fall again, and now building myself back up. Friends, I've talked about this before. I have a tough time. I don't spend as much time and effort on my friends as I feel that I should, but they're still all very important to me. If they ask me to do something, I would do anything for them. Gaming has gone down a fair bit, I think. So just coming out of depression, like when I was depressed, all of these things go way down because it just sort of drains you of passion. And gaming is one that hasn't fully recovered yet, especially like board gaming. It just hasn't recovered for me yet. Video games have somewhat, but not as much as they used to be. Boxing, unfortunately, like I mentioned, has dipped quite a bit, although writing has gone up. That's, I'd say, more of an 8 now. It's something I'm very passionate about, and spending a lot of time reading, writing, trying to make myself better at. And then the last thing is feats. So feats are traits, abilities, or emotions that have a huge impact in your life. Think of things like being calm in a stressful situation or being impatient. While these things may often fall between the spectrum of our positive and negative sides, we need to accept that our strengths and our flaws and realize we can turn our flaws into positive attributes. So for example, being impatient, not wanting to wait around for others could cause you to drive people into action. For the reverse, being calm in a stressful situation could make it seem like you're not invested or engaged in a heated conversation. So both those things are, the second one has been true for me, where I can at least outwardly appear to be calm in a situation, but because I am not displaying emotion, it can be interpreted as if I'm not invested into what's happening or invested into the relationship. And then therefore, that could be a negative. But at other times where, there's a crisis situation at work or something and a problem needs to be solved, that can be a positive. So try not to... there are some traits that you do want to just fix about yourself, right? Like an addiction might be one of those. Like that's something that you just want to fix. But an addictive personality is not always a negative either. Like it could be, you can become super passionate about something, and that thing can have a positive impact on your life, and you can use it to have a positive impact on others. So I left feats blank, but for me, autism is a feat. It comes with its pluses and its negatives. I've talked about it a ton of times before, but it's like being an F1 racing car, where if I'm maintained and the situation is right, no one performs better. But I struggle a lot if I am not maintained, or if I'm in a place outside of what is ideal for me. So autism is definitely a feat of mine. I think patience is a feat. I think I am a very patient person. It's something that's been true for as long as I can remember. It's something that helps me be a good teacher, I think. But I can also be patient in that I can just sort of go into the mindset of, well, I can just let this thing ride out. And that can get me in trouble with things like the depression, where it's like, well, you know, I'm having a bad day, but I can just wait it out and it'll eventually get better. But no, I need to actively do things in order to correct that course, or else it can get worse. So being patient can be good, can be bad. So those are examples of feats. And I think that covers everything that is currently in the journal. Like I said, you can go to rollpunches.com, ROLE punches.com. Download what I'm showing you now for free. You can print it out. You can fill it out via PDF. I noticed a couple bugs in this I need to go back and fix. But I would like to know what you think. If you want to put your thoughts in the comments below, in chat, in the Roll with the Punches channels on the Discord. I would like to try to turn this into a physical thing that, like, you know, people could buy and have and use with like pen and paper, other than just printing it out. I would like to make it into more of like an app that would make it a little easier to use on phones or on the computer. But before I get into that, I want to make sure that it is sort of at its final version. So if you guys have thoughts, let me know. Yep, it's all available right there. I'll put it in both. But you can download it for free. Don't even have to put your email in. But I've got a lot of positive feedback about this from therapists, from different professors, and things like that. Some of whom are using it in like introduction to college courses. And I've gotten pretty positive feedback, but I want as much feedback as possible before I try to take this to the next stage. All right. If anyone has any questions or anything, let's get them in before I shut this puppy down and get to the rest of my weekend. Hopefully you guys all have a wonderful weekend. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have other topics that you would like me to cover, again, comments, the Discord. I don't know exactly what I'll do next week. I might try to talk about imposter syndrome next week. That's one I've been meaning to talk about for a while. But I try to do these streams every Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time, depending on the time of year. But yeah, and if you missed them, I've done streams on autism, on ADHD, on depression, on anxiety over the last several weeks. I think those were all pretty good successes. And there's a lot of other videos on the channel as well. There's also an entire boxing regimen. If one of your skills that you want to increase is boxing, I think that is a good place to start. No, the cat moved. He's over there now. I appreciate you. Don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but I have some family members who have CPTSD. I've been trying to give them as much resources as I can to help them. Well, I appreciate it. And though not specifically for PTSD, it does deal with panic and anxiety. Like, I've talked about it before. Let me go back here. This one. Yeah. Nope. Go back. This scene, that image. I love Claire Wicks's work. Highly recommend checking it out. What has surprised you the most along your journey of discovering your autism diagnosis? I mean, it's how much I had right as a kid that I convinced myself that they were childish things that I should disregard in order to be an adult. I think that's the biggest revelation, where like I had all of these stems that I used to do and I thought it was wrong to do them, so I shut them all down, but realizing now I had it right all along, and it's something that I'm trying to do once again. I had a much better idea on what I needed when it came to self-care as a kid and wasn't afraid to ask for it. Again, something I lost as I was growing up. I always did feel as a kid older than I was. And as I've grown up, I have felt like I hadn't changed as much as it looked like other people did around me. Like I kind of had a lot of it figured out younger than other people. And there's still, a lot of stuff that I didn't have figured out, obviously. But I think I had a lot more figured out than I gave myself credit for. And I think we shouldn't force kids like to grow up in the wrong ways, I think there's maturing, but I think there are things we should carry from childhood until we die. Do you go back and reread your journals? I do. It does help. Sometimes it can be despairing because, I can go back and read from however many years ago and be like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm feeling this way, and reading is like, oh, I feel the same way now. So in those moments, I have to go to other entries at different times and be like, okay, I don't always feel like this, even though it feels like I've always felt like this, and that I will always feel like this. That's not true. But yeah, it's easy, like when you're drowning in those negative emotions, it's easy for that to become your entire reality. And it's nice to have previous entries to remind you that that hasn't always been your reality, and therefore it will not continue to always be your reality. And that's why having all those different sections on positivity in the journaling helps. And it's why I have what I call my torchbearer journal, where I write about things that I love, or things in this moment I would love to do someday, because there will be a time when I'm depressed or going through things that I will just forget that I ever, like what it felt like to love those things, what it felt like to enjoy those things, or that I wanted to try those things. And so I keep a journal specifically for that. I've seen trampolines be recommended a lot for particularly autistic children. I had an outside trampoline for a bit when I was like an older child, but I would just jump around a lot without a trampoline inside. It's just get too excited. Missing filters for the emotions. So I see it as where most people are like a bicycle with gears, where they can like shift their gears whenever they are experiencing emotions, or that kind of happens naturally for them. I've only got one, and I'm either pedaling or I'm not pedaling. And so it's a lot harder to regulate myself, and it's usually either all or nothing for me. It takes a lot of effort to be able to get it to not be overwhelming. And sometimes it's impossible. To reread my old journal entries, and sometimes I might find thoughts and ideas I had earlier that I forgot about. Yeah, and that can be good if you're rediscovering something positive that you want to get back into, but it can also be very reassuring where it's a negative thought and you can be like, man, I haven't had that negative thought in months or years. So whatever negative thoughts I'm having now will fade too. All right, well, I think that's going to do it for me. I'm going to be back next week, Saturday at noon. I'll probably see you before then on something Blind Wave related, but at the very least, I will be back here at Roll with the Punches next Saturday. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you're able to get out there and roll with those punches. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.